Welcome everyone to Male Fuzz TV. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Outlander Season 1 Episode 2. It's called Castle Leoch. I think that's what they said anyway, I can't remember.
I mean, you should know.
I don't know, I don't know this castle.
It doesn't matter, you should still know how to pronounce it.
Yeah, well, it was Loch, but I'll go with Leoch.
Your guess is as good as mine. Presumably better.
But yes, so that's episode 2 of Outlander. We had, some fairly positive thoughts on episode 1. There was potential, and we committed this episode. This is the first full episode in the past. Obviously, it took a bit of time getting to that time travel element in the first episode. So this is, at the castle. Pretty much the entire episode is spent at the castle. This is kind of going to be our home base, it seems, for the foreseeable future.
Yep.
And it deals with Claire intermingling with some new characters, learning kind of the ways of things right now, kind of try to date herself, because that's something that we didn't really talk about in the first episode, but she doesn't really know exactly when she is. She can make a rough guess, but
reasonable estimates based off of what she knows, but I think she gets an exact year in this one.
Yeah, she sees it written down somewhere, so it's like, oh, okay, so it's 1746, and I was like, oh, it's pretty much exactly 200 years, from where she came from,
give or take, yeah.
So that's neat. So yeah, it settles into some of the questions that the other characters have. We meet the Lord, the head of the castle, who's the brother of Douglas, who we met in the first episode, and they're relatively skeptical of her. They can tell there's something that she's not being completely honest about. Which is true, because she obviously knows she can't just say, "Oh, by the way, I'm from the future." And
yeah, there's a little bit of a interrogation at the dinner table.
Yeah. She wants to get back to the magic rock to hopefully, and she just doesn't really know how it's going to work. She's just hoping that if she touches it again, she'll.
It's a good, a goal as any, right? Hey, let's go back there and see.
It's the best hope she's got, admittedly. Like, I don't know what else she could do. That's really all she can try. But yeah. So I would say this one's not quite as strong as the first episode. It suffers a little bit from that episode 2 kind of. We're settling in, so not much plot's going to happen in episode 2. It's going to mostly just be, just further establishing things. But because all the exciting stuff's out of the way, it's not as.
It's more just establishing the characters a bit more, like everyone who's not Claire, basically.
Yeah. Because even Jamie, we only got a little bit of last episode, really. So that this kind of opened his backstory up a little bit. We get a sense of who he is, who some of these other new characters are, and we'll go through those. I'd say the other critique I'd have of this episode is that, and I don't necessarily mean to say that they are intending us to think that she's going to get this lift back to Inverness in 5 days, but there's just kind of this painful quality to me of like, yeah, you're not leaving, you're not going back there in 5 days. And every time she said it got more annoying, because I'm like, you're definitely not going. Okay.
It plays it till right at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
I will say, like, one positive improvement from the first episode.
Mm-hmm.
It's not gone entirely, but there's significantly less of the narration that we weren't a big fan of.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be the same, because I'd say it's pretty much all in the early, like, 5-10 minutes, more or less.
Yeah, there's maybe like a little bit later on, but not much at all. Let's say it's still there, but it's less grating when there's less of it.
At the very least, when it comes up again later, it tends to be when she's remembering things that her husband's talked to her about, like interrogation, and she's sort of like using it to.
It's framing a flashback.
Yeah, so there's at least more of a purpose to it than just sort of the general things. But no, this episode more overtly states some of the things that we were talking about last episode. That some people may consider some of the stuff that she does a witch. And she doesn't actually get accused of that by anyone, really, but like the old maid lady, Mrs. Fitz, kind of, what's she call her? I've forgotten the word she used. Charmer. I think it was Charmer.
Yeah.
But there's a little bit of that. But there's actually kind of another character, Gellis, who's from the village, who like talks to her at one point, and she comes off a bit more witchy. I mean, she says she's not a witch, but she has like potions and stuff. I think that's the word she uses, is potions. And I'm sure, like, it's whatever, because she catches Claire picking some mushrooms which are poisonous, but they do have another use to help with cuts and bleeding. And obviously that's just some of her knowledge coming into it. I mean, by the end of the episode, you know, the Lord Column, he decides that he wants to keep her around as the new doctor, effectively, because the previous healer met a sudden end, got a virus, and died within about a week. So
not surprising, right?
Yeah, and she's like, "Well, so you're keeping him as a prisoner, then, basically?" And he's like, "No, not unless you try to leave."
Yeah. As long as you stay here, you're not a prisoner.
So it seems like she'll be allowed to, you know, roam the castle to her heart's content and whatever.
Maybe the village as well.
Yeah, maybe the village. But if she tries to actually flee properly, they'll step in and do something about it. I suppose it's nicer than, oh, she's a witch, you know, kill her now, to at least recognize, oh, she has some expertise, let's just make use of it. I mean, it's still obviously under duress, but
yeah, but they seem aware that, okay, there's a logic to it. It's there is, I don't want to say scientific, you know, obviously we know it is, but they're not going to think of it in that way. But they can see a logic of following the steps as opposed to just magic, right? Because she doesn't present it in a magical way.
No,
I need this and this for very specific reasons, and she tends to talk them through it.
And because of the reactions last episode, this episode she actually is more conscious of, like, toning down the language to try and put it in terms that they'll be familiar with, and trying to, I don't want to say dumb it down, that sounds insulting, I don't really mean that, but just
make it appropriate. Like, at one point she says infection, and it's, they don't know what that is, it's just inflamed.
Yeah. So, like, and that was generally a theme throughout the episode, especially early on, where the narration was like, oh, like, to survive here, I'm going to have to kind of blend in. I'm going to have to actually try and come up with a story and actually be a part of this world, because I can't really explain certain things. So I just have to, you know, and obviously there's a lot in the episode showing how she's not used to this time period. Simple things like, you know, Mrs. Fitz has to help her put on this, like, dress of the time period. And I was getting exhausted just watching this montage of, like, how many bits and pieces go into this damn thing.
Way too much.
Because at one point she puts, like, a sort of sausage pillow around her waist. I'm like, what's that for? What's the purpose of this? And it's like, oh, it's so the dress hangs off at a higher kind of width. And I'm like, oh,
yeah,
whatever.
And padding out so it doesn't, like, you know, fall out of place and doesn't rub you.
Aye.
I will say though, I think it's meant to be exhausting watching this. Like, I think, to her it is, right, as well. Like, so
it wasn't a critique of the episode. This is a critique of fashion in the 1700s.
Yeah, we can get behind that. Everyone can, probably.
Yeah. So, you know, like, you know, a lot of that fish out of water stuff is kind of blended in, and she talks about how she kind of knows a lot about the time period through her husband and just sort of through, like, casual reading and stuff. But obviously, it's very different to actually live it. But there is a few moments where she notices kids playing with Dougal or to someone else, and kind of, like, these moments of, like, happiness where she's like, there's, like, actually recognizable parts of humanity kind of still here, as different as everything is. She's kind of recognizing certain things.
Yeah, the material, you know, uses are pretty different, everything, but the people are still fundamentally kind of the same.
Yeah, of course there's a lot of danger though, because most of them think she's a spy, and
yeah, which is not unreasonable for them to think.
You know, Dougal has people watching her. Because at first I thought it was more nefarious. I thought this guy was just stalking her on his own. And then when she confronts him, it's like, oh no, he's just spying on her for Dougal's sake. So there's nothing nefarious about it. It's just, you know, orders from up on high.
I kind of appreciate as well that they didn't try and, like, hide that they were following us. Like, yeah, I'm watching you. What are you gonna do about it?
I mean, how stealthy can you be when you don't have, you know, street corners to hide around?
Yeah. I don't know. I played Assassin's Creed. You can hide in hay bales.
It's more difficult in this time period. But immediately he just starts ranting and whatnot. So he doesn't, like, hide it once she calls him out on it. But yeah. So yeah, the episode ends with her being forced to stay. That's kind of her setup going forward. But like we said, most of this episode's character stuff. It's mostly setting up these little character beats and, you know, moments of flirtation with her and Jamie, who's hurt, and she's redressing the wound. She sees all these scars in his back from lashings, and he kind of tells part of the story where he intervened. Turns out, Thingy's ancestor, what's his name? Was it Jack?
Frank?
Frank? No, Frank was the husband.
Oh, Frank. Oh, yeah, okay.
But the ancestor. Turns out he's a bit of a serial rapist, because he was fairly going to do it to Jamie's sister in the past as well, and he intervened and got lashed. Ultimately arrested. He's wanted for murder, although he says he never done it, and I have no reason to not believe him at this juncture.
Yeah.
So that gives us a bit of him. He's got a bit of tragedy. He's always very upbeat though, even when he's telling these dark stories about his past. He tends to tack on a little joke or something, to sort of lighten the mood, as it were.
Yeah, and it does a lot with. He probably gets the most in this episode with this stuff. We're showing that kind of he has a way of sticking up for people.
Yeah, you get a couple of examples of that.
We see in the flashback it's his sister, so it was kind of like, okay, that's expected. But then we have another scene later where he won't just stand by and let this young woman get punished.
Yes, I can't remember the word they used, but it was just acting flirtatious, basically, by the sounds of it.
It was like acting loose, I think.
Loose, that might have been the word, yeah. The father wanted her punished, so he steps in and offers to take the punishment for it. And Claire wants to step in. She's held back by Gellis, who's the sort of the witch lady, as we're going to call her, even though she's not a witch, but that's kind of just what I remember her as, is the witch lady. And obviously she thinks like, oh, does he know her? Like, was she loose around him, and that's why he's like sticking up for her? But we find out afterwards that he's like, I mean, he knows who she is, like in passing, but he's never spoken to her. And he's like, well, I couldn't let it happen because like this will stick with her forever. If she's branded as this, like this will take a long time to get over it. Whereas, I'll be sore for a couple of days and that'll be it.
It's like, yeah, I can take a beating. I'll take him worse.
I think I appreciate it because I think there might be a temptation to write in to show that he's got a lot of heart and stuff, to show that when he's taking this beating, and you've got Dougal sort of giving the nods to the guy who's doing the punching, like for him to kind of like, I don't know, try and smile more after he gets punched to show that it like, that all you got, or like I feel like a lot of things would do that to show that he's got like this fighting spirit, and he never does. It's always kind of like taking like, no, this is obviously not pleasant. I'm taking this, and when you feel it's enough, then it's done. And it's always sort of with this little level of respect. Just it felt a bit different to, I feel like, how most stories would play this moment with him. I guess what I'm saying is he's not this cocky guy. He's got a bit of a sense of humor, but he's not cocky.
No, he just stands up, and for what he believes in. Clearly, even if he's not doing it to show off.
Yeah, there was an amusing line when Claire gets upset and he says, "Are you thinking about your husband?" Or she says that, and he says, "Oh, is he not alive?" And she sort of pauses and goes, "As a matter of fact, he's not alive, no." Technically very true, yes. He's pre-birth rather than post-death, but still,
point still stands.
Yeah, it's still very true.
I really enjoyed the what was it called? The trials, so the petitioning the Lord for the complaints.
Yeah,
because it's like all in Gaelic pretty much, which makes sense. Why wouldn't it be for them? But it's not subtitled for us either. And Claire's just getting bits of it translated, by the way, it's kind of the important points, but not the finer nuance of what's going on. Like there's a joke at one point, so don't worry about it, it'll be lost in translation. And I wonder if as the show goes on and maybe she learns some of the language, if maybe we'll start getting some subtitles.
Maybe, yeah.
I just wonder if right now it feels like we're very much kind of in a place with her of like, okay, everything's alien right now. That the sequence of the dressing, like this stuff with the language. I wonder if as it goes on, that'll feel less so, and that'll be reflected in the way the information's presented to us as well.
Maybe. I wonder if there's like a mixture of her getting used to this time period, but also kind of naturally introducing some modern flourishes to it to make it more comfortable for her. The dress, for example, maybe, okay, she'll wear something that's suitable for the time, but she'll adjust it a bit with some, techniques that maybe they've not got. To make it easier or feel just a little different to everyone else without standing out too much or something. I don't know. But just apply that to kind of, in general, everything. Because I have to imagine a lot of the medical advice and sort of treatment she's going to give out is going to be a bit more advanced than what anyone else is pretty much doing in the time period.
Might seem fairly radical, yeah.
Yeah. So I suspect that'll be something. And obviously she's going to go attached to people. I mean, she's already like having these moments with Jamie. They're going to have a picnic at one point.
Yeah.
When he finishes telling the stories and whatnot. And even other people are starting to notice that they're kind of connected, you know, where she keeps saying Mr. whatever his last name is. And
I think it was like McTavish, but it turns out that like, they're all like, who? Because it's a fake name.
yeah. Yeah,
That's out of his backstory. He's an outlaw.
but yeah, it means me young Jamie, as Dougal puts it. And that actor's name is McTavish, which I think was confusing me a little bit when they were bringing it up.
I suspect that was intentional. They've chosen like, actors' names to use as, like, you know, disguise names for other characters.
Okay, I just named his character McTavish. Just that'd be less confusing. Now I've got to swap Mackenzie and McTavish around all willy-nilly.
You Scottish, you'll manage. You probably know 100 Mackenzies and McTavishes.
Mackenzie's, yes. McTavish's, nah, not really.
Oh, the only one I think of from a game.
I can't say I've encountered many McTavishes. Mackenzies and Mackenzies, tons of them.
Yeah.
Tons of them around.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's kind of like all of like Jamie's stuff is kind of like getting to know him, and he gets a little flashback and whatnot. Some of the others, obviously, the Lord himself, call him Mackenzie. He's got a medical condition. Because I was wondering what this was. At first, I didn't even realize it was. I thought he just was missing his legs, and this was the weird like peg legs that they'd given him. But it's actually more of a bone disorder that he's got, and his feet and ankles are kind of a weird shape, and he kind of hobbles along. I like the note in our narration though that this has got a name, this condition, and it's named after the person that kind of
the most famous person who ever had it, but who won't be born for like another 100 years or whatever it was.
Yeah, I thought that was an amusing thing because you can't really explain it to them or anything. I do like the idea. You
mentioned as well there though that life expectancy with this probably not great, so I wouldn't be surprised if maybe he's gone by the end of the season.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked either. Especially since his brother Dougal feels like a more permanent mainstay. Maybe he takes over, or maybe like the hierarchy changes once something goes down.
Yeah, that might even be like maybe it might not be the end of the season. That could be like a mid-season kind of break to kind of refresh it for the second half.
I think what's interesting about where the show is right now with its story is that they're still very much settling into her being in this time period. I think what I'm looking forward to now is there actually being stories in this time period that she's invested in that are underway, because this episode, there's nothing else really going on. Like, it's all just about her biding her time for 5 days, waiting for this ride back to Inverness, and she's trying to talk to Jamie. She's talking to the old lady or whoever, the witch lady, and nothing really has this big consequence other than when people are talking to her and maybe trying to interrogate her subtly. There's no like the drive forward yet, and part of that is because she doesn't really feel like she belongs here yet. She's not accepted that she's stuck here yet. Maybe that's something we're going to feel going into the next episode now that she's been told she's not allowed to leave. But
it's definitely something I can see taking a few episodes. I suspect making her the doctor of the place might help, because there'll be she'll have to go out of her way to help someone, and beyond just Jamie, but when they bring patients, she might get a little bit invested in village life a little bit more.
I suspect that. I mean, there was that little ginger shit Hamish. Maybe he'll get hurt. She'll have to kill a kid.
Yeah. Maybe, especially that'd be. I don't think you start with that because he's like the heir to the place allegedly, right?
Aye.
So like maybe you build up to that. That's the important. Like you got to save the kid later. But
yeah,
I'm obviously doing that at some point.
Yeah, I do wonder. I mean, presumably Jamie, but I do wonder at what point she comes clean with someone. It may be a while away, but I suspect eventually someone is going to be told, and they may not believe her at first, but in time will.
Yeah, I can see it taking a little while. I don't know if that'll be this season.
Yeah,
it definitely feels like it has to happen at some point. She can't keep it up indefinitely. It's no different to superhero shows and the secret identity, right? Eventually, they'll let someone in.
Yeah, I imagine
Barry Allen, everyone.
I imagine eventually there's going to be something where she just has to like use a technique or a medication style that like she can't explain because it's just too. It will just look too magical to everyone or something.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is in my off the top of my head. It's not like she's got any instruments with her from the future that she can use, but
could be that, or it could be knowledge of a specific event that's going to happen, where she's like, we need to get out of this like we had in the first episode with the ambush, but to a more specific degree.
Yeah.
I don't know what that event would be because I'm not super familiar with the mid 1700s, but she had a husband who was very interested in this time period. She might picked up the odd bit that'll come back to her as she reads and learns more. In the time that she is now, she might remember more specific things. They're triggered by it.
Yeah. I'd be lost if I went back to this time. I wouldn't know anything that was going to happen. I mean, hell, at the start of this, she mentions, "Oh, it's a few decades to the American Revolution," which I did know. I know roughly when that happens, but she mentions that Scotland is already a part of Great Britain, and I'm like, good to know.
Yeah,
because I wouldn't have known that off the top of my head.
Yeah, and then you're just like, right. She's like, what king? She's like, okay. There's a minute. I actually quite where she throws it out and she's like takes a risk. She like throws out like King George II, and he goes along with it like, yeah. She's like nailed it.
Yeah, because that's just I don't know exactly when that happened. When the UK became the UK. If that term's even used yet, I don't know if it is. No one said it anyway.
No.
Was there technically a Great Britain before there was a United Kingdom? Which I suppose makes sense. Maybe they were waiting until Northern Ireland or Wales get involved. I don't know.
The Act of Union, passed by the English and Scottish Parliament in 1707, led to the creation of the United Kingdom of Great Britain on 1st of May that year. So that it was always as that. Okay,
so it wasn't two separate things. Interesting. So that's not even that long ago, and it's only about a few decades.
I mean, I'm willing to be within like some of their lifetimes. Like these older ones.
Oh yeah. They'll remember what it was like before.
Give or take 40 odd years ago, right?
So why have the red shirts been a bunch of pricks? What's going on here?
Presumably because these are the Scottish rebels who are maybe anti-union.
Oh, possibly.
Yeah. I don't know. Just also because they're English and
aye, pricks. Aye.
We were historically dicks to everyone.
Aye.
I mean, not saying we're still not, but more so.
Oh yeah, the English characters in this episode are they're even worse than our last episode.
Yeah, they're pretty bad.
I mean, at one point in the flashback, the ancestor dude's like it
was Jack, by the way.
Was it Jack? Okay, good.
There is a Jack and a Frank. So if Frank's the husband, then yeah.
So Jack is basically like, well, either I'll keep whipping your brother here, or you can take me in the house and have sex with me. Is one of those two options? That's what you've got. So like this is even more evil than the first episode was. It will be interesting to see again, and it comes up a little bit in this episode, but when Claire challenges them on something, and she's done it a couple times in small ways. There's a really good one in this episode where Colum he's sort of recounting her story and says, okay, you were almost raped, and that's when Jamie intervened, blah blah blah. But he phrases it in this way where he says, well, she just decided to rape you for no good reason. And she like immediately goes like, when is there ever a good reason for that? And he kind of like, all right, fair enough.
Point taken.
Bad phrasing. I didn't mean it that way. And I'm like, okay, but when is she going to push too far? When is some of her modern sensibilities going to be too much for anyone here to take? And what sort of conflict arises from that?
Yeah, it definitely feels like that's brewing in the not too distant future, and within the next few episodes, I'd have thought it's an easy point of conflict to kind of push for relatively early on.
Yeah, and I wonder, more long term as well. Like, are people going to start to hate her existence because she's maybe going to influence some of the other women that are around her because she is more outspoken, because she's smart, because she's
Does she
capable.
essentially push for an early kind of feminist movement?
Yeah, no, it's funny because I've been watching For All Mankind this week, the Apple show, and that's an alternate history show where the Soviets got to the moon instead of the US first, right? And we did the first episode back when it launched, and I don't know if there was too many shows at the time or whatever, but we didn't stick with it. But I always wanted to go back and check it out. And what's funny is that early on in the show, after Apollo 11 happens and Americans have also got to the moon, the Soviets then land a woman on the moon. And immediately, like, oh, we have to get a woman on the moon, like, right now, like, we have to keep up this race. So the whole premise of the show is basically, like, how far would things go if, like, the fire of the race kept going, right? And what's really been interesting about the last couple of episodes of that I watched is watching how effectively, like, there was these advancements being made, like, in a feminist way, because it was born out of this necessity for, you know, something else that was, like, you know,
this competition.
Yeah, like, Nixon wasn't being a feminist. He was a prick as always, but he was demanding this happen. But as a result, the women who were doing this were inspiring little girls out there, and it was, you know, you're seeing kind of like the effect of it. And I'm just wondering if in a similar fashion to this, because she is a more modern woman, you know, by this time period standards, is she going to affect things, at least locally, where she inspires some of the other women around her and possibly change some minds and attitudes, and maybe some of the guys won't like that, and maybe it'll cause some conflict.
Yeah, it's very possible. It's very possible that you'll have that earlier on, like that kind of indirect kind of action of it. You know, the result of you know, of them just being inspired by her doing what she, you know what she just, to her, is normal. And then perhaps later on, once she settles in and feels more comfortable in the time period, she's not afraid of saying the wrong thing constantly. Maybe she takes a more active role and pushes for things, you know, a bit more actively.
Yeah, maybe she's got enough friends so she trusts her, or that she trusts to have her back. Maybe she feels a bit more confident in speaking out. You know, things like that. It's just interesting. Obviously, there's no time traveling For All Mankind. Well, at least not yet. I mean, who knows? But it's just interesting that both effectively boil down to just changing one little thing in a certain part of history and just kind of, you know. That said, though, this show might go the other route and say that she was always going to travel back, and this was always going to be the sequence of events. It could do.
It might well do, yeah.
It could very well go down it, and it would, you know, and you get a little flashback in this episode when she goes into the alchemy lab or whatever they're calling it, and it flashes back to her sitting on the same table in the future. It's like, oh, that's like an odd bit of foreshadowing. If, like, she was always, like, when she's talking about, oh, it must have been lonely down here for the person working here, it's like, well, that was always you, you know. So there's you know, there's some interesting things there if they do go down that route, depending on how we approach it.
Yeah, that's where a lot of the interest early on, I think, is going to lie in seeing kind of what directions it's choosing, because I do think we'll probably have a good few episodes without major plots happening, just kind of settling into the groove of life in the 1700s.
Yeah, I could see her having, like, her first patient next episode. Like, someone comes in, you know, I got stabbed by an arrow or something, whatever.
I can definitely see something along those lines.
And, you know, I don't know if nurses take a Hippocratic oath, but I'm sure the sentiment still kind of sits with them.
I'd like to think so. The good nurses, anyway.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Obviously, we were saying she's the doctor now, and effectively she is. Obviously, she's technically a nurse, but by this time period standards, she's going to be doing miracles. So, no one's questioning anything here, I don't think, in terms of the terminology.
No, they're not calling her a doctor. I think they're just calling her a healer, right?
Yeah.
What is he using? And the new healer for the place.
I don't know if they've ever called anyone a doctor, so they probably wouldn't.
Yeah.
So
probably not. I mean, maybe not up in the middle of nowhere, Scotland, anyway.
What's that mean?
It means what it means.
Aye. Well, enjoy your country, a rapist, you prick. So
very fine country, thank you very much. Allegedly.
You're at war with France again. I love that in the narration. Actually, they're at war with France again.
Yeah, for like the 100th time. Doesn't stop for another. Oh well, 100 odd years still, I think, from this time.
don't know. He's still at war with France? I don't know. I don't keep track.
In spirit, we're still there. Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny. It's funny because you said England's still at war with France. Even though technically it's the UK, are England still declaring wars with people that Scotland's not involved in? That's pretty
Probably.
funny.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be surprised. You might have Scots drafted into the army, but it's still the army of, in this case, King George, right? And while technically he is the king of both, that especially this early on in the Union, I would suspect there is some pretty hefty separation within those powers still.
Yeah, I was having a chuckle thinking about how obviously Mel Gibson's got a lot of demons, right? A lot of dodgy opinions from him. But at least he does seem to really dislike English people, which is admirable because they're the villains in both Braveheart and The Patriot. And I was thinking about that this episode because it's still redcoats.
I was going to say, because objectively in both those situations, they are the villains.
They are, yeah.
That's not a matter of perspective, really, unless you're English at the time, which is you probably didn't think you were the villain, but you were.
Crying over the Tiber in the war. Ooh.
Hey, screw those filthy Americans. You will have your tea and you'll pay your taxes. It's just good subjects of the crown.
It's just funny to me that he developed two movies where the English are the villains. I'm like, how many other time periods, probably a lot, that you could go to and pick, like, oh, let's have the English be the villains.
There's a good 1,000-year-old chunk of time where you could just go, yeah, English are the bad guys.
Oh, yeah. Anything where it's like an English ship arriving in another country for the first time and, like, being awful to the natives. Like, there's a lot of that.
Yeah, anything like 1100s onwards, I'd say, because you mid-10, 1060s got the Norman conquest. From that point, at that point, the English are the good guys, and the Norman French are the conquering, invading, occupying force. But then after 50, 100 years, where they are basically, oh well, that's England now. They are English. From that point onwards, yeah, we're basically the bad guys.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we cleared that up.
Napoleon. But I mean, that's just like 700 odd years from that point.
Is that why English people like to make fun of French people? Is because there's this like down the generations, this guilt of actually being part French. this projecting. It's
probably a reasonable amount of it. What I would say, because from you're probably not wanting a genuine answer, but I'm going to give you one anyway.
Okay.
So at that point, you've got the French, the Norman French, come across and become the nobility, and they take over. All the peasants, all the common people, all the people that most of English people today would be descended from, were English, right? They were subjugated, so they would have a hatred of the French nobility. So it would be less guilt and more genuine hatred, but it does become directed inwards at your own nobility at that point, because they are English after a few generations as well. Yeah, but it probably does stem from that pretty significant amount of it anyway.
All right, well, there you go. Hey, on the upside, mostly the Scottish characters, admittedly, but there's a high concentration of gingers popping up in this show.
Yeah, and no one's taken the piss out of them yet.
That hadn't started yet. I was another couple of 100 years before the ginger.
Once we get some more English in the villages, I'm sure they'll drop some ginger jokes.
Is that conflicting for you? It's your own kind that are going to be the ones who start it.
I mean,
because you're ginger and English, you're crossing the streams a bit.
But I mean, Irish descent, right? So,
aye. Who knows?
Own reasons to hate the English in the past.
I wonder if we'll see any Irish people at any point in this. If they'll
I would be surprised if we didn't. Obviously not straight away, but at some point, it's especially up with Scotland, it's a very close neighbour.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of Irish characters eventually, but we'll go through all. However, maybe it'll be 10 seasons long by the time it's done. Not a single Welsh character. Honestly,
as well though, they keep talking about her French name, and that's part of her fake backstories. Oh, family in France, and I do wonder if we'll maybe see some. I don't know if we'll go to France or we'll see French people, but I wouldn't be surprised to see some of that kind of play into it.
The French invaders, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a weird bit of the backstory though, is that England are at war with France, but she's like, "Oh, we're on our way on a trip to France," and I was thinking, that seems like a weird time to be taking a trip to France when your own country is at war with them.
Yes, but England are always at war with France at this point in time.
That's true. I suppose you just have to accept it as the status quo and just deal with it.
Yeah. That's just the way it is.
Ah, well. At least no one added nukes yet.
Could you imagine?
France and England would just be a wasteland. No one. It'd just be radioactive.
Yeah, we wouldn't be sitting here.
What do you mean? Well, when you say we, you mean not we, as in both of us. There'd be a nice big wall at the bottom of Scotland saying "Do not cross, radioactive beyond this point."
I like how you think that you wouldn't have got lumped in with the Union at this point.
Oh, no. Like, nah. Just have a nice white flag at the border, just like, no. So, Mr. Frenchman, please don't. We also enemy of the English. Thank you. You
kindly. Would probably have got nuked by the English for cowardice.
Well, nah, see, that's dangerous. There's too many farms, too many good fishing spots up here. Can't be having that.
Yeah, that's definitely what they were concerned about.
Hey, you say that, but in
this hypothetical situation where they had nukes.
You say that, but in this time period, those are very valuable like things.
They are, but also England is bigger and also has lots of farmland and fishing spots at this point in time.
They're not as good.
How do I even argue with that?
Not as good. Scottish fish is better than English fish, if everyone knows that.
Do they?
Aye.
Is that an established fact?
I'm pretty sure it is.
This feels remarkably patriotic of you. I don't know, I'm suspicious.
I just like fighting you. I am not patriotic at all.
You're normally not. It seems that this show is bringing out the patriotism.
I just like any excuse to make fun of you, I'm on board with.
Yeah. This show is making it annoyingly easy.
I still say you need to get a red coat. You need to be sitting there in a red coat for the.
Oh damn it! I forgot.
The rest of these.
Yeah. Oh well, I'll get.
I'm sure there's
I can buy a red hoodie.
Go all out. Go to like a. I don't know if
I'm not buying a red coat, like an actual red coat.
You know, how like Americans sometimes do those Civil War reenactments. Like, is there a thing here where you can go buy like the red coat uniform? You can sit in that.
Yeah, of course there is. I'm not going to sit in that. I will take the joke as far as a red hoodie.
All right, I'll accept the red hoodie.
All right, I'll buy one for next week. Probably be after the next time we do an episode of this.
Probably.
It's on the list.
We're getting, we're starting to come out of summer now. You'll be getting colder soon.
Yeah, I can always do another hoodie.
All right, there you go. Clearly, this show is going to let us tangent into bollocks country shit every episode, so prepare for that. Apparently, yeah. No, I mean, I thought this was a fine episode, but it does have a little bit of that episode 2 slowness, and maybe that'll last for a few episodes before things like kick up again. But
it does, but it wasn't enough to make me concerned about the future of the show.
No, it didn't make me regret saying we'll do 8 episodes at least. Like, I'm still happy to, get a significant chunk in and, judge it accordingly when the time comes. But there you go. So let us know what you think of the episode in the comments. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications and all that stuff. Get us on the Twitters. Mailed_fuzz for channel updates. And of course, you can support us over at patreon.com/mailfuzztv on a regular basis. You get some bonuses, or you can make a one-time donation via the super thanks button on YouTube. Either way, any support is obviously greatly appreciated. And if you don't, you'll ken all about it, just to use a Scottish phrase that was in this.
Which they were saying a lot. There was a point where she threw it back at them, like really sarcastically, almost like, you're saying this too much.
I know. Like, that might have been the first time I've ever said it, because I've heard other people say it, It tends to be something that like someone of an older generation will say when they're mad at you. When they're saying you're going to get into trouble.
Which tracks, it tends to be as well the older characters in this using it as well.
That's true, that's true. But yeah, they said it a lot in this episode. But hey. So yeah, thank you very much once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?